Hey everybody, welcome to today's podcast. Today I have my sister Lorraine with me, and we are going to talk about a case that has links to the Highway of Tears in British Columbia, and that is the case of Cody Legebokoff.
Cody was born on the 21st of January 1990, and he was raised in Fort St. James, British Columbia. He was described by his friends and family members as a popular young man who loved to compete in ice hockey. Cody didn't show any propensity for violence, and he did have a minor criminal record, but the police did not have him on the radar for anything.
Yeah, so typical Canadian young man.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I shouldn't say typical. Not all young Canadian men have criminal records, but he just sounds, just being a young man.
Absolutely. So after he graduated from Fort St. James Secondary School, he lived briefly in Lethbridge, Alberta, before he eventually moved to Prince George, where he shared an apartment with 3 close female friends. Cody also frequented the Canadian social networking site Nextphopia using the handle One Country Boy.
Yeah, I've never heard of this Canadian social networking site myself, and we were talking about this earlier where with a handle like that, like he was a country boy, but also using a name like Country Boy in your handle sort of makes you look approachable and maybe innocent.
Absolutely.
Like he's not coming across, devil worshiper 6969. It's One Country Boy, just a nice guy. So very tricky there.
A small town young man.
Yeah. So on November 27, 2010, at approximately 9:45 p.m., rookie RCMP officer Constable Aaron Keller observed Cody pulling his truck onto BC Highway number 27. And he was pulling out from a remote logging road, so it was suspicious that he was there in the evening anyway.
Absolutely.
According to case report written by the officer, Cody's truck was speeding erratically, and the officer had a hunch that there was something wrong there. So he decided to pull over the vehicle under the guise of a routine traffic stop. He believed it was odd and even suspicious that someone would be on the road that late in frigid November. The officer suspected the driver of poaching in the backwoods and signaled for him to pull over.
And that was very suspicious to be on an abandoned logging road.
Oh, yeah.
Speeding through it like that.
Yeah, in November, too, especially where they are. So Keller, the first officer, was joined by a second RCMP officer, and they searched Cody's truck. They discovered a multi-tool and wrench covered in blood, as well as a monkey backpack and wallet containing a children's hospital card bearing the name Lauren Leslie. When questioned about the blood on him, Cody purportedly said that he was poaching and he had clubbed a deer to death, and he said, I'm a redneck, that's what we do for fun, but his truck didn't have the deer carcass in it. So,
again, suspicious.
Yeah, of course. The officers arrested him under the Canada Wildlife Act and called for a conservation officer with animal tracking skills. The warden traced the tire tracks of Cody's vehicle up the road into freshly fallen snow, found footprints leading to remains of Lauren Leslie. So that was the owner of that monkey backpack.
And I think it's kind of important at this point to say that the police found only 2 sets of tracks. This plays into a story that Cody told later on.
Yeah, he has a few explanations. So After Cody's arrest in connection with Leslie's death, he was linked by DNA analysis to the deaths of 3 other victims, and we will talk about them a little bit later. So the only way, I mean, they could tie him to the murder, obviously, but to solidify the case, they were also charging him under the Canada Wildlife Act. And even the harming of animals without being a licensed hunter, sort of, it contributes to the case a little bit later on, too.
And also it being out of season, thus they being charged with the crime of poaching.
Yeah. Yeah, so they got him every which way, really.
So now we're going to talk about his victims. The first victim was Jill Stacy Stadenko. She was a 35-year-old mother of 6 who was last seen on October 9th, 2009. Unfortunately, she was found dead 4 days later in a gravel pit on the outskirts of Prince George. His second victim, Natasha Lynn Montgomery, was a 23-year-old mother of 2 children who was last seen on October 31st or early September 1st of 2010. Her body was never found, but her DNA was later found on samples taken from Cody's apartment.
And apparently his apartment was just, he was very, very sloppy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
His apartment was just so full of DNA, and it was a mess. And I was thinking about this. He was living with these other girls. Like, thank goodness nothing happened to these other girls, his roommates.
Well, apparently at the time that he did this, he brought these women to his apartment. His roommates were not around. He never did it in front of witnesses.
Well, so. Yeah, I mean, no doubt. But I worry about, imagine being the parents of these girls who were living with them.
Yeah, but fortunately or unfortunately, this time they weren't aware of what was going on.
Yeah.
The girls obviously didn't know that Cody was up to no good.
Yeah.
They never suspected because his reputation was just an average everyday guy.
Yeah, yeah.
So we'll move on to his third victim, who was Cynthia Frances Mass, who was 35 years old and was last seen on September 10th, 2010. Again, her body was found in Prince George Park the following month. So Mass died of a blunt force trauma. She had a hole in her shoulder blade and broken jaw and cheekbones. And the injuries to her neck were consistent with someone having stomped on it.
Yeah.
Awful,
just brutal.
Right?
Yeah, it's brutal. And this guy, you can tell, we had talked about rage killing in our last video, and this sounds just like it. Very, like, a lot of passion behind this one. Like somebody wanted them completely done.
Well, thinking too that, with the sexual assaults, he probably felt he needed to kill them to get rid of all evidence.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but I mean, unfortunately, again, he was very sloppy. Like, he was
Absolutely.
young. How old was he? Like 20?
19, 20 years
19, 20 years old.
Yeah.
So, of course.
So the Crown said that Stadenko, Montgomery, and Mass had been sex trade workers. And that's how Cody was able to connect with them.
Apparently he got cocaine from these sex workers as well.
Exactly.
So
that's the connection there.
Yeah.
His fourth victim was Lauren Dawn Leslie, who was 15 years old at the time. On November 27th, Cody murdered her. Leslie was far younger than the other victims, obviously, and the connection there was that they met and became friends on the website Nextopia.
Yeah.
Leslie is included on the list of murder victims found along the Highway of Tears in North British Columbia.
Yeah, so I will include it in the video, or I'll include it in the description, a little bit of information about the Highway of Tears. We will eventually do a podcast about it, but we kind of like to look at it as sort of a case-to-case and not just clump all of these women all together in one video, because we feel like each of the victims deserve a video, deserve to be talked about separately. So we may even do something like we'll do 2 or 3 of the victims in one podcast. That way their story can be told and we'll do it right.
Yeah, I think it's important to mention here too that Cody was only one of the Highway of Tears serial killers.
That's true.
There were two other, and perhaps in the future we'll get into discussing the other two.
Yeah, because apparently there's more. So, yeah. Horrible, but we will definitely go there.
It should be said that, these were the only victims. There were a number more, but different perpetrator.
Yeah, I think right now the count is at 40, a little bit over 40, but I believe there's definitely a lot more than 40 victims. It's just that their cases have been sort of brushed aside. There's only certain ones that really make it to mainstream media that get any attention, but you can guarantee that there's a lot more than 40.
Well, yes, and some of the victims are only listed as missing. Their bodies have never been found, so, to classify them as being murdered is something that still needs to be investigated.
Absolutely. So Cody's trial consisted of 4 counts of first-degree murder. It was originally scheduled to begin September 2013. It was delayed a month until October, and then again it was pushed to June 2014, so already a couple years later to even begin the trial. He pleaded not guilty on all 4 counts. The judge and 12 jurors heard testimony from 93 Crown witnesses and the defendant. So I have a little bit of footage. I will put it up right here. Just a little bit about the trial, what was said. But Cody testified during the trial that he was involved in the 3 deaths, but claimed he did not actually commit them. So I guess he's just saying I was there, or I drove a vehicle, or anything but the
killing. He
killing.
actually committed the murders.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. He alleges that a drug dealer and 2 accomplices, whom he would only name X, Y, and Z, were the actual murderers. So everybody but him that night, or those nights. Prosecutors did not accept this attempt to plead guilty to lesser charge of second-degree murder. So he probably would have been better off to just...
Well, he changed his story so many times, and trying to fit just the right story to make him look innocent and someone else guilty of it, because the last thing he wanted to do was admit that he was the one that committed the murders.
Absolutely. So he's trying to plead guilty to a lesser charge. His attorney should have advised him probably to plead not guilty to the full charges instead of guilty of a lesser charge. I don't know. It just seems like a very unwise move there by his legal team.
Obviously, though, they had very strong physical forensic evidence. They had DNA. They had blood all over the truck. They had blood all over his apartment, and the DNA was directly connected to his victims. So, desperate grasp at trying to make himself look innocent.
Yeah, that's what I mean. He probably just should have pled not guilty to the full charge, just considering the amount of DNA and the amount of evidence against him, and just take it from there. Being a defense attorney would not be easy, especially with that amount of evidence against your client. How do you even deal with it? The only thing you can do is to try to get him a better deal. You know he's guilty, but
which is
save his life, I guess.
Typical of defense lawyers, trying to get a lesser charge.
It's not an easy role to play.
Exactly. When the evidence is there, you can't beat it. So let's work with it.
Yeah, it just comes down to saving the client.
Yeah.
So he was convicted on 4 counts of first-degree murder on September 11th, 2014. On September 16th, he was sentenced to life in prison with no parole for 25 years. So he is being convicted of all of the murders, but he's serving one sentence of 25 years.
Because they put the 4 together as concurrent.
Yeah. So it was life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. So similar to, if you remember from the Paul Bernardo video, I'd mentioned about the 30-year mark. So they will serve their 25 years, hang in there, be good for, 5 years, and then they will have a chance at parole. So it's a game actually the convicted could play if they wanted to play the long game to either get out or to minimum security.
Yeah, to manipulate the loopholes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, and it's
definitely right.
It's right there. It's right there. They can definitely do that. Additionally, BC Supreme Court Justice Parrott added him to the National Sex Offender Registry, given the sexual assaults committed as part of the murders and Cody's apparent degradation of the victims' bodies. He lacks any shred of empathy or remorse. Parrott said of the killer, he should never be allowed to walk among us again.
Okay, yeah, and it should be said here maybe that allegedly his third victim's body was mutilated. They never found the body, but I don't know where the evidence comes from, but apparently they suspect her body was mutilated and placed in different places. So maybe that's a contributing factor to why they never found her body.
Yeah. In February 2015, Cody filed an appeal due to decisions against change of venue and defendant's legal representation. So he was opposed to his legal team. He was also opposed to change in venue. So venue plays a huge role. If you know anything about trials, venue is everything. I don't know. Once it starts making national headlines, like almost everywhere is contaminated. So, you know what I mean? It's kind of like good luck to you.
Obviously another ploy by his lawyer to lesser charges or, help him get off as much as possible.
So under the Faint Hope program, in particular for prisoners who are registered under the Sex Offenders Act or the Sex Offenders Registry, Cody was originally imprisoned at Kent Institution, but he was transferred in March 2019 to Warkworth Institution, which is in Ontario. So he was transferred from BC to Ontario, much like Bernardo, sort of the same situation. Actually, the move of Bernardo really sort of re-sparked interest in Cody's case, well, the victim's case. And because it was done in a similar fashion.
Yes, I agree. From maximum to medium security.
Maximum to medium security. So both of these institutions are well known for their sexual offender rehabilitation programs. So we're going to see what happens here. This was a couple years that he was moved into Ontario for this program. Now let's see, just like we're watching the Bernardo case, let's see what happens with Cody, whether he becomes rehabilitated or where this program leads him. So he's not even going to have a parole hearing for many, many years, but let's just see where this program gets him in prison. I know the victims' families are hoping that he is sent back to maximum, obviously.
Of course.
Right? So we will keep an eye on this case. We'll let you know what happens, what these sexual offender rehabilitation programs are all about, and what they're contained. And we may even make a podcast about it. I think that would be interesting.
It would. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's a lot more common that we know. I mean, a lot of these prisoners are moved from maximum to medium, and we don't hear about it. We hear about the major cases, but we don't hear about the everyday cases. So who knows how many of these people have fit into this program, believe they can be rehabilitated and put back out on the streets, and they may or may not eventually get paroled.
And what happens, like, if they did get paroled? What about if they made it through the program? And we'll look into it, and maybe we'll do a little podcast about it, because it would be kind of nice, at least if we're not going to know about these prisoners being moved, it would be nice to have a little bit of extra knowledge about what these rehabilitation programs are all about. Because don't forget, this is there's a lot of money being put into these animals to be rehabilitated. I think we have to right to know about what is involved here.
Absolutely.
So we'll keep an eye on it. We'll look into it, and maybe we'll do a podcast in the near future about it. So thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. We will have you back.
For sure.
And maybe,
look forward to it.
Yeah, maybe that would be good for that podcast about this program.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Looking forward to it.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.